Okay, welcome back, everyone, as we continue our Motzi Shabbos marathon, holding in the top line of Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Thank you all very much for joining us at this late hour. But what can we do? That's when Shabbos is over. Tomorrow night, Mitzvah Hashem, at 5 to 9, we'll be broadcasting from our bungalow up in South Fallsburg, and we will have over here a big screen set up here in the shul for everybody's pleasure. Michal Avram is in charge to get it going. So the Gemara now tells us, Yom Echad, one day, even Bava Basra, I heard this, was paranoid. And even having blinded Bava Basra, he was still afraid that Bava Basra would conspire against him. So Yom Echad, one day, Asav Yosef Kamei, he sat, he didn't say who he was, he sat before Bava Basra, Amar, and he said, Chazi Mar Hay Avda Bisha, Maika Ovid. See what this bad slave, look what he did, look, he killed all the rabbis. So Amalei, so he said to him, My Avidle, what should I do to him? Amalei Niltaye, why don't you curse him? Niltaye Mar. Let the master curse him. Amalei Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Gam bimadoch, even in your thoughts, Melech al tekal, you shouldn't curse a king. So, but then Hurda's playing the role. Amalei Hailav Melechu, you're calling him a king? He's not a king, he's a slave. Amalei, so he says, well, havi osher ba'alma, even if it's a rich person, Iksiv b'chadrei mishkafcha, in the chambers of your bedroom, al tekal al-asher, don't curse a wealthy person. And v'lo yeyeh l'nasi, and even if he's a prince, Iksiv nasi ba'am koloisar, prince amongst your nation, you shouldn't curse. Amalei, so Hurdas still argued, but that's only that's only if he behaves like your nation. He doesn't behave like your nation. He's a murderer. Amalei, so Bava Basra said, Mistafina mine, I'm afraid of him. Amalei, so Hurdas says, what are you afraid? There's nobody here but you and me. Amalei, there's nobody here to tell him. It's only I and you. Amalei Ksiv, it says, Ki oifa shamayim yoylech esakol, a bird from the heaven could carry a voice, or bal knafayim yagedover, and winged creatures could carry a rumor. In other words, you never know who's listening. Amalei, so when he saw that Bava Basra would not curse him, said, Amalei, I know who, it's I. If I would have known that the rabbis are so careful, I wouldn't kill them. What could I do to rectify myself? He wanted to do tshuva. Amalei hu kiba oirei shalaylam. He put out the light of the world. The chachamim are the light of the world. The chsiv kiner mitzvah v'Torah are. The mitzvah is the lamp and Torah is the light. Yelech v'yasek ba'oirei shalaylam. Rebuild the base of English, the light of the world. The chsiv v'niyaru elav kol hagayim. And all the nations will be illuminated by it. Ikid amrei hachi amalei. Who's sima eina shalaylam? He blinded the eyes of the world, because the chachamim are the eyes of the world. The eyes of the congregation. Let him be involved in the eyes of the world. I will destroy my temple, the glory of your strength, the pleasure of your eyes. Amalei, so Hurdas said, I'm afraid to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. Mistafina mimalchusa. I'm afraid of the emperor. I'm afraid of Rome. Amalei, so he says, I'll give you a strategy. Shtar shlicha. Send an agent. V'leizel shata. Tell him to take a year to get there. V'la'akiv shaita. And let him haggle with them a year. V'lahader shaita. and let him return after a year. And during those 3 years, you'll have already dismantled and rebuilt it. You'll have dismantled it and rebuilt it. So Ovid Hachi, he did this. So they sent to him, Imloi Sasarta, when the Romans finally sent him back, Imloi Sasarta, if you didn't dismantle it, Altista. They didn't want to start up with God. But Vim Sasarta, if you dismantled it, Altivne, don't rebuild it. Vim Sasarta Vanisa, and if you dismantled it and rebuilt it, of de Bisha, you're a bad servant, Basa de Oven Mismalchen, who does things and only then asks. And Im Zainach Halach, and if you pride yourself because of your might, that you killed the house of Chashmonaim, Safrach Khan, we have your pedigree here. Loi Racha v'loi Barecha, you're not royalty, you're not the child of royalty. Hordis Avda, your Hordis, a slave, Klanya Mizavid, who made himself a free man. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, you're not a Racha? My Racha, Malchusi, you're not a king. I am today Rach Mashuach Melech. I am today royalty, anointed as a king. What they called Yosef, they called Yosef that he was royalty. Imre, if somebody didn't see the magnificent temple of Urdis, he never saw a beautiful building. But my banya, how did he build it? With green and white marble stones. With blue, green, and white marble stones. One row came out and one row went in, so that in the indentation they would put the mortar. In the Kabul Sida, that's where they put the cement. He then thought to coat the whole temple in gold. Amrulei Rabbanan, so the rabbis told him, Shafke, leave it. The Hachi Shafar Tvei with the blue, green, and white, it looks more beautiful. The Mirze Ki Idvasa the Yama. It looks like the waves of the sea, which are very relaxing. So the Gemara says, how could Bava Basra give advice to this wicked slave? Bava Basra Heichi Ovid Hachi. How could he do this? Why was Daniel punished? Nebuchadnezzar saw a dream that he would suffer terribly. And Daniel gave him a eitzah to postpone his retribution. So, Daniel, why was Daniel punished? He gave a eitzah to the wicked Nebuchadnezzar how to postpone his punishment. Shenema lehein malka, behold king, milki ishbar lalach, may my advice be pleasing to you. V'chatoch, your sins b'tztakaprok, you could redeem with charity. V'avayosach, and your iniquities, b'michan einon, by being gracious to the poor, hein tavi archa l'shalvasech, they will give length to your solitude. V'ksiv, kula moter al Nebuchadnezzar malka, all the suffering that he dreamed about happened to Nebuchadnezzar, but ksiv l'ktsas yarchim trei aser, only after a year. So Daniel's advice of doing charity helped him extend his solitude. So the Gemara says, well, it's no kasha. You can't give an eitzah to Nebuchadnezzar. He's a goyish, wicked emperor. Hordis, however, was a slave that had mitzvahs like a woman. Iba yisei mashani avda the chayev b'mitzvahs. The Iba yisei mashani beis hamikdash. It's different because the beis hamikdash needed to be rebuilt. The Eloi Malchus, because if it wouldn't be for the king, Eloi Mispanei, it wouldn't have been rebuilt, and that's why this was an exception. So says the Gemara, where do we find Daniel was punished? With Daniel minalan di anish. How do we know that he was punished? Ilay mamishum dichsiv vatikra Esther lahasach. Esther called Hasach. Hasach was Daniel. V'amarav Hasach zed Daniel. There's a beautiful Chasam Sofer over here. The Chasam Sofer asks why Daniel, who had such a beautiful name, Daniel is the same letters as La Adonai, because he was the quintessential servant of Hashem. So why was it changed in the Megillah? So the simple reason is because he acted in a clandestine way, ferrying messages from Esther to Mordechai. But the Chasam Sofer says something amazing. He says Daniel is Begematria Haman. And Daniel didn't want to have a name even with the Gematria of Haman in the Megillah. Everybody's going to be clapping and booing Haman by the Megillah, so he didn't want to have a name that's even Begematria Haman. So that's why he was called Hasa. So the Gemara says, Hanich Laman Yamar Shechotchu Migdulasai. It's good according to the Man Yama that he was cut down from his greatness, and some say that Haman assassinated him by catching him bringing messages from Esther. So then that's good that we know that he was punished. It's not good, but I'm saying that's where we know he was punished. Elaman Yama, that he was called Hasach, Shekol Divrei Malchus Nechtochen Alpiv, that he was so necessary in the government, that all decisions were sealed, were decided by Daniel, then Ma'iklamei. But where do we see that Daniel was punished? Says the Gemara, we know he was cast into a den of lions, and that was his punishment, as we welcome in the Bluth family. And we continue this beautiful Gemara on this beautiful Matzah Shabbos marathon. And I thank you all for joining us. Says the Gemara, Kol K'minig HaMedina. Now we already mentioned that if they want to make it with not cut stone, half bricks, whole bricks, and then we say, or whatever the custom is, what is that coming to include? Hakol La'asiyeh Mai, La'asiyeh Asr D'Nehigeh Behutza V'Dafna, where they don't make it walls out of brick or out of stone, rather they make it out of palm shoots and laurel leaves. That's enough. Since they did it together, if the wall falls down, then the real estate underneath it and the stones belong to both of them. Says Gemara, well, obviously, Pshita. If each is claiming that it's theirs, so of course it belongs to both of them. Why should it not be? Says Gemara, it's talking about where it fell on one of their sides. So if it fell on one of their sides, if we didn't know that the minig is they each gave half, and they each gave half the material, we would say that it belongs to the one that it fell in because he's the muzik, and the other one would be Amaytz Mechaver Alavarayah. Inami the paninu chadler shusadiday, or even if it didn't fall in, but one quickly in the night where we didn't see where it fell, one quickly gathered it to his side, he would be able to claim that he was the mozik. Ma'od the same, and they have idach, let the other one be Hamaitzi Mechaver Alavarayah, that he should be the one that has to bring the proof to take it away from him. Kamash Malan, since the minig is that each one gives half and each one gives half the materials, so if it falls down, both the real estate underneath and the materials are divided. V'chein begina, and also if it's a garden, makam shenagu ligdar mechayv, in the place where the minig is for them to make a division, a fence, we require it. Now, says the Gemara, remember, a garden, there's a bigger concern of an ayin hara than in a bika. Because a garden is all kinds of beautiful plants and flowers. A valley is just a grain field. So now the Gemara says, Hagufa kasha. There's an internal contradiction over here. Amrit v'chein begina in a garden, makom shenagu ligdar mechayven oisei. If the minig is to fence, then they have to fence. Mashma, but that's only if it's the minig to fence it. Hastama ein mechayven oisei. But if there's no practicing minig, then they don't make him put up a fence. Ein seifa. Aval bika makom shenagu shaloi ligdar. In a place where the minig is not to fence, I say, implying, but if there's no minig not to, then they have to. I say. Now that makes no sense, because even in a garden without a minig, you don't have to fence, even though there's a bigger ayin hara, then in a grain field where there's less ayin hara, you surely shouldn't have to. Hashta stam gina amrit loi. Why should it be that if there's no minig, you have to fence in a grain field? Amar Abaya, so Abaya says, this is the way to read it. Haki Kamar. V'chein stam gina, likewise, a regular garden, where there's no minig, or b'vekaim shenogu ligdar b'bika, and in a place where the minig is to fence in a grain field. V'chayvin, I say. Says Gemara, but the Mishnah says avol. It doesn't say v'chein. Amalei Rava imkein my avol, which makes a difference between a garden and a grain field and a valley. Alama Rava hachi ketani. This is the way to read the Mishnah. V'chein stam gina, a regular garden, because there's ayin hara, is kamakim shenagu ligdar dami. Is like there's a minig to fence it. And therefore, even if there's no minig, you have to put up a fence because there's a lot of ayin hara. Umechayven, I say. Aval stam bika, where there's only grain, there's not a big thing, is kamakim shaloi nagu dami. It's like a place where the minig is not to fence it, and therefore, ve'ein mechayven, I say. So ayin hara is an issue, but ayin hara is a bigger issue by a garden with this crocuses and all kinds of things, and there's more reason to insist on a wall than in a valley. However, if the person in the valley, let's say here we have Nachman and Steve, if Nachman wants his privacy, he brings the wall completely into his side of the valley, Obona, and he uses all his materials. Now, how is he going to prove that it's his? And he puts a marker on the wall, and the Mishnah says he puts the marker on the wall on the other side, on Steve's side. So the Gemara says, my chazis. What is a chazis? Amar Rav Huna achbiyei lekarna levar. He makes the top of the wall and he points it, an edge of it, towards Steve's side. Says the Gemara, but if it's his wall, why does he point the edge towards Steve? V'navin melagav. Let him point the edge towards his side. Says, well, you know why? Because then Steve will put an edge on his side and say that it's both of theirs. It's mine and yours. Says Gemara, but if he tilts it towards Steve's side, Steve will just cut it off. Steve will cut it off. And he'll say there's no sign, so it's both of ours. Says the Gemara, if he cuts it off, it'll be noticeable. Gazia made the idea. If he cuts it off, it will be noticeable. Ikidam, right? Amar Rav Huna, michva lekarna milagov. He points it towards the inside. He tilts it towards Nachman. Tilts it towards his side. Now, it's so interesting. How does that fit in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says you should make a gozis mebechutz. So the Gemara is going to ask that later. But you see the kindness of Rashi. The Gemara is going to ask that 2 lines later. But Rashi is worried that somebody is going to be preparing this Gemara, and he's going to say, I don't understand the Gemara. What does it mean he points it towards the inside? The Mishnah says, L'bechutz. So look how Rashi is so kind. Rashi says, it's the bottom line of Rashi. He points it milagav, towards his own side. L'tzad shalai. U'lekamei parach, and later the Gemara is going to ask, Chama b'chutz ketani. Now, why does Rashi have to say that? We're going to see that 2 lines later. But Rashi is so worried that we're not going to go to 2 lines. We're just not going to know what's going on. We're going to say, I don't have pshat. That's how kind Rashi is, how considerate he is. So let's see the Gemara. That Nachman, to prove that it's his, he makes the projection on his side. V'na'aven milavar, make it on Nachman's side, on Steve's side. Goy is like Havri, we're afraid that Steve is going to cut it off. And it's going to say it's both of ours. So if Nachman puts it on his side, Nami layef lechavre, Steve will add a projection on his side. Is going to say it's both of theirs. Says the Gemara, no, it's only what's made in the beginning as one piece. Leifufa made the yediyah. An addition will be recognizable. Says the Gemara, it says that you should make a chazis on the outside. So how can you say that Nachman points it on the inside? Says the Gemara, kasha. That's not kasha. That's not kasha. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, as we turn to Dalan Amid Beis, Mamash Rabbi say, do you realize what a way to start a new week this is? It's an amazing way to start a new week. It's really unbelievable. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Nishaya ba'amsa milavar. If Nachman makes it on his side, if he brings it into his property and he gives all the building material, he should smear on the top of the wall on Stephen's side. He should smear with plaster, with lime, an amma on Steve's side. Says the Gemara, milagav. Why doesn't Nachman do it on his own side? After all, it's his wall. Avid chavrei milavar. We're afraid that Steve is going to make it also on his side. And he's going to say it's both of theirs. Ihachi, says the Gemara, if he makes it on Steve's side, hashtanami the kapolei chavrei. Here, Steve might peel it away. Says the Gemara, Khalifa made the idea. Peeling it away will be recognizable. Now the Gemara says, we said that you could make a wall with Hutza and Daphne. You can make a wall with reeds and palm fronds. If Nachman makes the wall on his side, how could you show it with reeds? Hutza, how are you going to make a sign? Amar Rav Nachman, Sinufe Yereche Milavar. He should take the palm tree, the palm shoots, and bend them towards Steve's side. Says the Gemara, Avid Milagav, let him do it on his side. Avinami Chavrei Milavar, Steve will bend it on his side. Va'amar Didividideyu, and he'll say it's both of theirs. Ihacha, says the Gemara, Hashtanami Gayez V'Shadilek. Why aren't we afraid that when he bends it towards Steve's side, Steve will cut it and throw it away? Va'amar Didividideyu. Says the Gemara, Masrik Leitina. After he bends it towards Steve's side, he'll smear it, he'll coat it with plaster, with mud, so that he can't cut it off. So the Gemara says, Hashtanami Osi Chavrei V'Kolaflei. Steve will come and peel it off. Says the Gemara, Kilufa made the idea. Abaye says, I'll tell you the truth. Abaye says, palm fronds, palm shoots, you can't make a sign. it's too easy to camouflage and cut off. There, Nachman will have to make a star with Adam that the wall is completely his. Now the Mishnah then goes on to say, what if they both make the wall? If the valley doesn't need a wall, but if they both decide to make the wall, so now how did they, as we welcome in Jack Silverman, now if it's made by both of them, how do they prove it's made by both of them? So the Mishnah says they make a sign on each side. So the Gemara says, why? Let neither of them make a sign. So if neither of them makes a sign, that shows that it belongs to both of them. Because if it was one of theirs, then one of them would have the sign. The fact that neither of them make it, that proves that it belongs to both of them. Amalei Rava Zika Ravashi Lo Yasu Lo Yizeh Lo Yizeh. Let them both not make it. Amalei Lo Tzricha De Kodem Chad Minay Yavav Didei. What happened is Steve made a sign. So once Steve made a sign, the only way to do it is that Nachman also has to make the sign. Says if Nachman doesn't make it, Steve will claim that it's his. So therefore they both make it. So the Gemara says, I don't get it. So the Mishnah says something only for crooks. If really it's enough that neither of them should make it, so the Mishnah is saying something only for a crook. Amalei v'tona takanta l'ramai kamash mulan. So the Gemara says, well, this is all for a ramai. Amalei v'reisha lav takanta l'ramayu. When the Reisha says that we have to make a sign on one side, that Nachman has to put a sign on Steve's side, obviously it's telling us that because we're afraid that Steve will claim that it's his also, even though it was Nachman's material and all of Nachman's side. So you see the Reisha is also for a Ramai. Amalei Bishleim Reisha Tanadina teaches us the law. Right? It teaches us the law that if Nachman wants it, he brings it all on his side. Once it tells us that, it tells us how Nachman will prove that it's his. The Sefer, what din does it teach us? The Sefer, it doesn't need to tell us that if they want to do it together, they have to share in the expense. So, Ela Sefer Dina Tani Takanta. Ravina, you're right. Here we're talking about where they both decide to make it with palm. And it's telling us that if one does it, then the other one should also do it. And you're right, the chiddush is that you shouldn't think that with palm, like a baya, that it's only good with a shtar. It's enough a sign that each one tilts the palms to their side and coats it with cement, and that's enough. It's only if Steve did it first. If Steve didn't do it first, then it would be enough. We neither do anything, because we neither do anything, we know that it's both of this. So now, the last Mishnah of the evening, it's already a long evening, and bravo to everybody learning with us. What a schar. What a schar. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. What a way to start off a week. And this is the way to finish Shas, Rabbi is saying. Just plowing through Shas. It's bravo to everyone. What we have over here is that Yisrael has a valley in middle, and he's surrounded on all four sides, east, west, south, and north. He's surrounded by Shelley. So Shelley's into security. So Shelley fences one of his fields, and therefore now Yisrael has one of his borders fenced. Then Shelley fences a second field, and then Shelley fences a third field. Now, even though Yisrael has fences now around three of his sides, he's in the inside, he could say, I don't get anything. I'm open on one side. I don't get anything. But if Shelley then fences his fourth field, and now Yisrael is surrounded on all four sides, so then Shelley could have Yisrael split the cost. So now let's see this inside. Hamakif, remember, Yisrael has a field in the middle, and on all four sides of him, Shelley has a field. So Hamakif es kaverai mishloish ruchaisav. If Shelley fencing three of his fields now creates fences on three sides of Yisrael's field, the gutter, if he surrounds on three sides, the gutter es rishayim es hashniya es hashlishas, and he fences his first field, his second field, his third field, ein mechayven I say. We don't make Yisrael pay. Rabbi Yaisi says im Amad v'gader es haravias. If he fences the fourth field, then megalgal and alav es hakol. Now, there's two questions about this Mishnah. The first question is, who fenced the fourth side? Did Shelley fence the fourth side? So even though Yisrael never showed that he wanted it, but since he's fenced in on all four sides and he has perfect security, so Yisrael has to chip in. Or does it mean if Yisrael fenced the fourth side, so now he shows that he wanted it? That's the first question. The second question is it's not clear what the machlokes is between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yaisi. The Tanna Kama just says three sides you don't have to pay. Rabbi Yaisi says the fourth side you do have to pay. So is the Tanna Kama arguing on Rabbi Yaisi? Or is Rabbi Yaisi just giving us more information? It sounds like, since it says Rabbi Yaisi Omer, that Rabbi Yaisi is arguing on the Tanna Kama. In what area is he arguing on the Tanna Kama? So now the Gemara will give us all the details. Says the Gemara. Boy, these plugs are so mercurical. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mashmol, halacha k'Rabbi Yaisi. The law is like Rabbi Yaisi. And by the way, again, since the Gemara says halacha k'Rabbi Yaisi, that means the Tanna Kama is arguing on Rabbi Yaisi. But we'll have to see what the Tanna Kama is arguing. Halacha Rabbi Yaisi, the Amar v'Gada Esaravias, if he goes ahead and fences in the fourth side, megalgal and alav esakol. We roll on Yisrael to pay half for all four walls. Now, says the Gemara, lo yishna amad nikif, lo yishna amad makif. It makes no difference if Yisrael, who's the one that's being surrounded, makes the fourth wall, or even if Shelley makes the fourth wall. Imar, Rav Huna Amar Hakol Lefi Mashigadar. Rav Huna says that Yisrael has to chip in no matter what building materials Shelley used. Whether he used stone, he has to chip in with stone. Chia Barav Amar Hakol Lefi Dmei Konim Bezul. He has to chip in, but he only has to chip in cheap reeds. Because he could say, yeah, I'm benefiting, but I don't need stone. I would have done cheap reeds. Now, Tanan, The Tanna Kama says if Shelley surrounded the first side, the second side, the third side, ein mechayven oisai. Implying, haravias, if he did the fourth wall, mechayven oisai. Ein meseifa. That seems to be what Rabbi Yossi says. Rabbi Yossi, Amei Mamad, V'gadar es haravias, megalgal av esakol. If he fences in the fourth side, then we make Yisrael chip in and everything. So what's the difference between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi? Bishleim el Rav Huna, Dama Akol Lefi Masha Gadaba. The Rav Huna says that it's everything according to what he has to split and share in whatever the building materials is. Hainu Dika Mein Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi. That would be the machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanna Kama savar that although Yisrael has to chip in, but he only has to chip in the bare minimum security. He says, I would have made it with cheaper materials. Hakol lefi to make Kana Mizul in, Mashigadoloi, but if Shelley used expensive rock, he doesn't have to chip in. Rabbi Yossi said, Hakol lefi Mashigad. El Chir Barav, but according to Chir Barav, Dama Hakol lefi to make Kana Mizul, my Ika ben Tanna Kama, Rabbi Yossi. Either may Kana Mizul Kayavle, if he doesn't even have to give cheap reeds, my Kayavle. So that's one way of looking at it. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what the machlokes is between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi. Iba yisema agav netira ikabenaya. Remember we said that the reason to put up a wall is because of ayin hara. Ayin hara is only when the crops are on full bloom. So Yisrael would say, if it wasn't for you, I would just hire a guard to chase people away. Iba yisema aga netira ikabenayu. Tanna Kama savar, the Tanna Kama says, Yisrael says, I wouldn't even pay for a full fence. Aga netira in. I just hired a guard for the few days that the crops are in full bloom before I harvest it. To make Kana Mizul, I wouldn't pay for a full fence. Rabbi Yossi suffered to make Kana Mizul. V'iba yisema. Does Yisrael have to pay for all four walls, or only the fourth wall? V'iba yisema rishayna shniyo shlishas ikabenayu. The difference between them is whether when the fourth wall is put up, does Yisrael have to pay for the first three walls? Tanna Kama savar ravia sudiyavle. He only has to pay when he puts up the fourth wall, so that's when Yisrael benefits. He only has to pay for the fourth wall. He doesn't have to pay for that. While Rabbi Yossi savar, no, since he benefits now from all of them, now the Gemara gets to the question. Now the Gemara gets to the question of who put up the fourth wall. If Shelley put up the fourth wall, maybe Yisrael will say, look, I never would have needed it. And therefore maybe it's only if Yisrael puts up the fourth wall. So the question is, who put up the fourth wall? The Tanna Kama savar taima da amid nikif. It's only if Yisrael puts up the fourth wall, so now he shows I'm happy with the enclosure, the megalgal of a sakal. Aval amid makif. But if Shelley puts up the fourth wall, ain't a nice in ela demei revius. He only has to pay for the fourth wall, but not for the first three. Rabbi Yossi savar loishna nikif, loishna makif. It makes no difference if Yisrael put up the fourth wall or Shelley put up the fourth wall. Im Amad V'Gadar, if the fourth wall is put up and now he benefits from the entire enclosure, Megalgal and Alav Esakal, we put everything upon him. Now Rabbi said this was a big job because it was two very big blot, and bravo to all of you. We're going to now do the Be'ezus Hashem, the Mishnah Yomis. Tomorrow, broadcasting Be'ezus Hashem at 5 to 9 from our bungalow in South Fallsburg, Be'ezus Hashem, and Mirz Hashem tomorrow night here in Agudas Yisrael Beis Zev. We will have the big screen for everybody to enjoy, and thank you everybody for joining us.